The United Nations is not ushering some new world order as advertised. It is reinstating the old world order, an order where the rights come from the state, not the deity. An order where unarmed citizens are helpless, hapless, and hopeless as their governments rape and pillage them with excessive taxes, steal their private property, and mass murder them in the name of national security. An order of top-down governments commanded by dictators, sultans, and oligarchs, kings, queens.
The greatest thing that our founders did when they created our constitutional republic was to say, you know what? Let's stop being a kingdom. Because we've noticed that no matter how much you limit a king, when you call somebody a king, at the end of the day, he's going to act like one, and people will always act like subjects. Let's be a constitutional republic. We created the new standard for liberty. The expanded rights of the people would be something that would spread throughout the world. What's interesting is, as we forget history, we steer ourselves towards the exact same thing our founders tried to keep us from. We have created an oligarchy in the judiciary by talking about how the Supreme Court issues rulings and makes law. We have created an oligarchy in Congress where we've established that the people believe that Congress can issue any law that they can pass by a majority. We've nearly created a kingdom with the enormous amount of power that has been transferred to the office of the executive.
I think that if the people in this country were to recognize the necessity of getting back to the founders' plan, if they were to do that, that would throw a massive monkey wrench into the plans of the globalist oligarchy, because they want disarmed populations that are easy to control, and they want solidification of power. The more power is solidified, once again, easier for them to control, and they have a few people to control at the top rather than the entire population. The last thing they want is that for the power of the purse and the sword, of money or military power to be diffused among the people. That's why they don't want sound money, that's why they don't want a militia.
Yes, the New World Order proposed by the UN power elite is nothing less than global totalitarianism.
The idea of total control from the top down, the elites, the royalty, the monarchs, with the peasants and serfs at the bottom serving their masters above. This is as old as the hills. But the new part is, in the old days, they used to administer their power and their control over the people at the point of a sword, with weapons and military power. Today, they're doing it with control of the mind and economic power. So in that sense, it's new. It's the old relationship, but being brought about with new weapons. The weapons of mind control and economic power.
To this, you may say hogwash. This movie is presenting nothing more than conspiracy theories. Time will tell. But consider this. Consider the mechanics of establishing a world government and review what is actually happening.
I think to answer that question, we just need to open up our daily newspapers and see how it's developing. Because we already have world government. It's not fully developed, but it's greatly developed. We see right now that the so-called leaders of all the nations get together quite regularly at international conferences and meetings, and they share ideas and they come up with plans and strategies. And all the nations seem to go along in lockstep. The philosophy in all of the nations of the world today, I can't think of any exception, is collectivism. It's hard to find much differences between countries anymore, except in the degree to which they have gone toward collectivism. Every day that goes by, there's more government power, more taxes, more internationalization of that power, and fewer personal liberties.
By definition, a world government is a superstate. Instead of having 195 independent countries, as we now have, a world government would be one country run by one centrally planned global government. What F.A. Hayek warned us about in The Road to Serfdom.
The United Nations is an attempt to create an umbrella organization with all of the nations still existing as nations, although some of their authority has been siphoned off by the United Nations. So the United Nations has not quite reached that goal. I'm sure that that's the ultimate goal of the people behind it, is the nation states will disappear. They will simply become districts or appendages of the United Nations as the single world government. So you will have essentially one nation as we now understand it, which has one government and control over territory, but that government will control the entire territory of the entire world.
A world government, if such a monstrosity were ever to come about, would look very like the government of Communist China, very like the government of Communist Russia. All the institutions of world government, the United Nations itself, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the Law of the Sea Conference, there are dozens of them now, the International Labour Organization, I could go on listing them forever. Not a single one has its governing board elected by the peoples of the member states of the United Nations who created that body. The essential pre-qualification for any such thing is that that government should be elected by the members of all the states parties to the treaty creating that particular entity. And you can imagine how unpopular it would be in places like Communist China if they were made to conduct elections for a world government, when the people would say, well, why can't we have elections for the government in China? And it is precisely for that reason that no world governing entity, the ones I've mentioned, is elected, because the communists won't stand for it.
The criterion for consolidation would be mineral resources, land, water, air, cultures, languages, ethnicities, or even by local government jurisdictions. This is already happening with COGs, also known as Councils of Government.
World government has always proven itself to be the worst of the worst in terms of political systems. All of the global powers of history have been antithetical to the principles of freedom and liberty. They rule by brute force. They do not recognize the rights under God of the individual. They believe the state to be supreme. They believe the state to be in the place of God, literally. We are more free when we are more sovereign as a nation. The more we acquiesce to those global institutions, the more freedoms we lose, the more of our constitutional form of government we lose. And so the best thing that the American people can do is totally reject America's involvement with any of these global institutions.
The Great Seal of the United States, which was put together in the 1780s, contains the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is New World Order. The history of our country was very, very shaky at the beginning, and thanks to George Washington, we survived the impact of that, but they haven't gone away. They're still working at it, and we have to be on guard.
No matter what the criterion for global government's consolidation, what's known as regionalization, it would mean the end of borders, hence the end of national sovereignties.